Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll discuss the events that took place in Massachusetts. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, the Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill Apartments complex. The man was very disturbed. He informed the dispatcher that he saw a door ajar in one of the apartments on the third floor. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in this apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him. It alarmed him, and he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and streaks on the floor. They led him to one of the rooms. When he entered, he found Rebecca lying on the floor with no signs of life, and her belongings scattered. The mess in the room suggested that whoever had taken Rebecca's life was looking for something in her apartment. Rebecca Charlotte Payne was born on April 19, 1986. She was the only child of Virginia and Nicholas Payne of New Milford, Connecticut. Rebecca graduated from New Milford High School in 2004. While at high school, she was keen on sports, playing field hockey, track, and tennis. Rebecca then enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston to study athletic training. This program involved the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In the fourth year of the 5-year program, she was on the Dean's Council and was president of the Athletic Training Club. Rebecca was instrumental in organizing Northeastern University's A Vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum. She was also involved in the Episcopal Lutheran Center. She had many friends. She could find common ground with everyone. Rebecca was always ready to help if someone needed her. Thus, when she was found dead in May 2008, her friends could not believe what had happened, and did not understand who could have done this to her. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they immediately noticed the front door had no signs of forced entry. It could indicate that Rebecca probably knew the person who took her life. Perhaps she let them in herself. Her apartment, located on the third floor, had 2 bedrooms. In one of them, Rebecca was lying face down on the floor. The red streaks from the living room to the bedroom where Rebecca was lying indicated that the attack took place in the living room. The casings found there also confirmed this. During the forensic examination, the experts established that someone had shot Rebecca 5 times. Judging by the blood traces in the apartment, she was still conscious for some time and was able to crawl to the bedroom, but her strength left her there. The detectives had to find out who could have done this to her. Who could deal with her so cruelly? The police almost immediately ruled out the version that what happened was a theft that went wrong. After all, her valuables remained untouched. Things in her apartment were scattered, but detectives concluded that this was the way the perpetrator wanted to mislead them. However, it was also possible that the mess was the result of Rebecca resisting and fighting for her life. When examining the apartment, the investigators noticed that the balcony door was open in the same way as the front door. The situation in the second bedroom indicated that someone had lived in it too. They needed to find out the identity of this person since it was they who could take Rebecca's life, and if this was not the case, they needed to exclude them from the list of suspects. After talking to the manager, the detectives learned that Rebecca did not live alone. She rented an apartment with her fellow student, and now the police started looking for her. At the same time, the police interviewed all residents of Parker Hill Apartments. Someone had shot Rebecca 5 times, and it would hardly have been possible to carry out something like this silently. The officers were shocked when it turned out that between 3 and 4 a.m., numerous residents of the apartment complex heard a woman screaming and the sounds of gunshots. But unfortunately, no one bothered to call the police. Perhaps everyone thought that someone else would do it. In psychology, this is called the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome. The bystander effect, or bystander apathy, is a social psychological theory that states that individuals are less likely to help a victim in the presence of other people. On March 13, 1964, 28-year-old Kitty Genovese was deprived of her life near the apartment building where she lived. It was in Kew Gardens, Queens, in New York City. 2 weeks after the incident, the New York Times published an article erroneously claiming that 38 witnesses saw or heard the attack, and that none of them called the police or came to her aid. The common portrayal of neighbors being fully aware but completely non-responsive was later criticized as inaccurate. Nonetheless, it prompted an investigation into the social psychological phenomenon that later became known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome. Unfortunately, in the case of Rebecca Payne, neighbors did hear her screams, as well as the sound of gunshots, but no one called 911, and such indifference is shocking. For Rebecca's parents, her death was a heavy loss. As stated by her parents, Rebecca was a driven and compassionate young woman surrounded by her friends. She gave out of her heart, she was always thinking about others, always helping, Virginia Payne said. When interviewing residents, the police spoke with a man who lived on the first floor of the apartment complex. He told them he saw a black SUV approaching the building at night. However, he couldn't see the car's license plates and who was getting out of it because it was dark outside. The apartment building where the crime occurred had surveillance cameras installed both inside and outside. Investigators hoped that the CCTV footage would help them solve this case. They asked the building manager to provide them with these recordings. However, it turned out that the footage from those cameras could only be viewed in real time. The equipment there was outdated, and to record the footage, it was necessary to insert a video cassette into a VCR and press the record button, but no one did this. Taking into account this information, as well as the fact that it was the manager of the residential complex who found Rebecca's body, investigators started suspecting him of committing this crime. He also lived in this building, and thus had constant access to Rebecca's apartment. He knew that no one was watching the surveillance cameras. Perhaps he waited until late at night and then attacked Rebecca for some reason. The police wanted to check all possible versions. Suspicion against the manager intensified when the police ran a background check on him. It turned out that he had previously had problems with the law related to prohibited substances. There was something else that caught the attention of the police. One of the officers noticed several dark red stains on the front door of his apartment. Criminologists swabbed the stain and sent it for examination. Meanwhile, the apartment complex manager was taken to the police station for questioning. The investigators asked him lots of questions, trying to find out if he was hiding something and whether he would start changing his story. But he denied any involvement in the death of Rebecca Payne, saying that he spent the whole night in his apartment and was not alone but with his wife. The investigators talked to his wife, and the latter confirmed that her husband had spent the whole night with her, providing him with an alibi. When a report from the laboratory stated that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, the police released him since there were no grounds for his arrest. Looking through video and photo materials from the scene, the detectives drew attention to this card. This card is used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, and each use of such a card remained in the system, along with data on exactly where and at what time it was used. The transit police provided detectives investigating Rebecca's case with CCTV footage. After reviewing these recordings, the detectives determined that this card was used by Rebecca. She was heading home and was calm and alone, and apparently, no one was following her. Thus, this footage did not help to get on the trail of the criminal. A few days later, the investigators obtained another video from the surveillance camera. This camera was installed outside the hospital building near the Parker Hill Apartments. In this recording, officers noticed a black SUV that was passing by during the same time when the attack on Rebecca took place. This car also matched the description of the witness. However, the recording was of poor quality and did not allow them to see the car's license plates. They came to the conclusion that it was a Ford car. After identifying the girl who was Rebecca's roommate, the detectives invited her to the station to ask a few questions. They needed to find out if she was connected in any way to what had happened. She said she was shocked when she found out that someone had taken Rebecca's life. According to her, she moved in with her parents while she was preparing for the exam. When her father and mother confirmed this, she was excluded from the list of suspects. But the investigators' conversation with her was not a waste of time. She shared with them information that could potentially be useful for the investigation. According to her, there was another person with access to their apartment, and this person was Rebecca's boyfriend Matt, their fellow student. But did Matt have a motive for taking Rebecca's life? The investigators had to find the answer to this question. They contacted Matt by phone, and he informed them that he had left Boston to live with his parents in New York State, around the same time as the attack on Rebecca happened. It seemed that he was depressed because of his girlfriend's death, but it could just be an act. According to Matt, he was staying with his parents all this time. They confirmed his words. After receiving a printout of call history from Matt's cell phone, investigators found out that he had been talking to Rebecca on the phone the night she was attacked. The conversation happened at about midnight, a few hours before her death. But it also became known that the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. Investigators conducted an experiment and established that Matt wouldn't have had time to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours and commit this crime. Thus, he was also excluded from the list of suspects. Family and friends were saying goodbye to Rebecca in her home state of Connecticut. But the police still had no evidence, no new witnesses, and no DNA samples that could help in an investigation that had obviously reached a dead end. We think of Rebecca. The fact that she will never be with us. We will never hear her laugh, never telling us what she gets up to or her progress in life. That's all been taken from us, said Nicholas Payne. Years passed, but Rebecca's parents never got answers to their questions. Their daughter's death was still unsolved. However, in 2012, an event occurred that can be called an unexpected break. The Boston police arrested a man named Anthony White for illegal substance trafficking. He was facing long-term imprisonment. Realizing this, White offered investigators a deal, promising them he would tell details about the night Rebecca Payne died in exchange for a reduced sentence. The investigators knew this might be the only chance to solve the old case, and thus accepted this deal after consulting with the prosecutor. White said that on May 20, 2008, he was contacted by an acquaintance named Cornell Smith, who, like him, was involved in dealing prohibited substances. Smith told White that he wanted to meet with him. Smith arrived at the appointed place with their mutual friend, Michael Balba, who was behind the wheel of a black SUV. The three of them headed to the Parker Hill apartments. Balba parked where they could see what was happening inside the apartments. According to White, when Cornell Smith saw Rebecca in a window on the 3rd floor, he said, "That's her." They stayed there for a while and waited for the lights to go out in Rebecca's apartment. After the lights went out and they decided that the girl inside had fallen asleep, Smith climbed onto the 1st floor balcony, from there to the 2nd floor balcony, and then the 3rd floor one. The door from the balcony to the room was open, so he went inside. But Rebecca wasn't sleeping. She was lying on the couch in the living room. When she saw the intruder, she started screaming. A short struggle ensued, after which Smith fired 5 shots at her. Then he left the apartment through the front door, went downstairs, and they drove away. Investigators doubted the veracity of White's testimony. Perhaps he came up with this story based on information he learned from the news to get a reduced prison sentence. The officers did not understand what the motive was. Why did Cornell Smith need to take the life of Rebecca, who had absolutely nothing to do with the world in which he lived? What White said next surprised and upset them very much. According to White, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters lived on the 1st floor of the Parker Hill apartments. One of them looked very similar to Rebecca. These sisters, who lived on the 1st floor, were Smith's rivals and illegal substance dealers. Smith believed that he got arrested because of those sisters and decided to take revenge on them. He knew they lived in the Parker Hill apartments, but he did not know on which floor and in which apartment specifically. Therefore, when Cornell Smith saw Rebecca in the window, he mistook her for one of the sisters he wanted to take revenge on. Checking the biography of Cornell Smith, investigators found out that in February 2008, he got arrested for dealing prohibited substances. However, shortly before Rebecca's death, he was released on bail. He decided to take revenge on the sisters, who, in his opinion, were the reason why he got arrested. Let me remind you that Anthony White told all this to investigators in 2012. By this time, Cornell Smith was already in prison. 2 years before that, the court sentenced him to 12 years for selling prohibited substances. Now, after White's testimony, he was also charged with taking Rebecca's life. However, he denied any involvement in the case. Before Smith appeared in court, prosecutors received news that would devastate the case. Anthony White died in prison, and now the prosecution has lost its main witness. There was no physical evidence linking Smith to Rebecca Payne's apartment, which is why White's testimony was so important. However, the prosecution's hope that Smith would receive the punishment he deserved was not lost, since there was another person in the car with White and Smith on the night of the crime. And this person was Michael Balba. Detectives tracked him down and discovered he owned a black Ford Expedition SUV that looked like a car caught on a surveillance camera. Plus, it matched the witness's description. Balba was arrested and taken to the police station, but since there was no evidence against him, he denied his involvement in the case and demanded a lawyer. Everyone again thought there was no hope of bringing Cornell Smith to justice. In the hope of finding at least something that could link Smith to Rebecca's death, investigators studied his court file related to illegal substance trafficking, and they could not believe their eyes when they found Smith's letters, in one of which he implicated himself. He sent these letters to the judge who was conducting the trial related to illegal substance trafficking. In the letters, Cornell Smith presented himself as superior to other people. Some of the letters were totally meaningless. However, in one of them, he wrote something that became the key evidence against him. It is worth noting that it is not completely clear why these letters did not attract attention earlier. After all, he addressed them to the judge. So, in one of the letters Smith wrote, out of anger from an altercation that had happened downtown Boston, they set up an occurrence which was leading to the unfortunate passing of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell Allen Smith Sr. This letter confirmed that he was in her apartment at the time of her death. The trial took place in 2015. The district attorney said Rebecca Payne was truly an innocent victim and had no connection to Smith or Balba. From the beginning of the trial to the sentencing, Smith changed 3 lawyers: Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney for more than 20 years, and the first lawyer who represented Smith, withdrew from the case because Smith hit him on the head, right during a preliminary hearing in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. It came out of the blue. He stood up like lightning and whacked his handcuffed hand on his lawyer's head. It was a pretty nasty assault. It shows the kind of person that Cornell Smith is, said Nicholas Payne. Karp said he will not press charges against Smith, and it will be up to the judge to appoint a new attorney to represent him. Nicholas Payne was asked what it was like to see a man accused of taking his daughter's life. We look at him and say, that's evil and stupidity mixed together, and we wish we didn't have to see him, but we know we have to. It doesn't allow us to move forward. We just want the process to move forward, Payne said. In the end, nothing changes for us really. She's still gone. We'll never see her again. Cornell Smith took a deal and pleaded guilty to the involuntary deprivation of Rebecca Payne's life. A judge ordered Smith to serve no less than 18 years in prison but no more than 20 years. When ordering the sentence, the judge told Smith to turn and face Rebecca's friends and family, because they are the faces of pain suffered due to his actions. In Rebecca's memory, her town's local tennis courts have been named after her, as well as a garden and the National Athletic Trainers Association Scholarship Fund, set up in her name. We don't want her to be forgotten, Nicholas Payne said.